Next up, we're away at Leicester City. The journey is doable as it's a relatively short hop up the M1, so it should be possible to get there and back in a day by coach, rather than by plane, which will no doubt please certain parts of the club's hierarchy. Kick-off this Sunday is the horribly early time of midday, with the game being shown live on BT Sport. I expect the Ant Hill mob on Eyes Up Mother Brown will be in action as well. So, Leicester then. Well, they are pleased with their start, having won all three in the league. An opening day 3-0 win at the new boys West Brom was followed up with a 4-2 defeat of Burnley at home. Last weekend they went to Manchester City where they plundered a cool 5-2 win. The only blip on the season so far was the 2-0 home defeat to Arsenal in the League Cup. They'll also be taking part in the Thursday Night League, but they can forget about that for a bit, having qualified for the group stages automatically. Daisy, the socially distanced personal assistant with a beautiful smile, tells me that at the time of writing they've brought in 2 permanent signings and a loan for the first team squad. Now, I have no idea of the stats. Daisy gave me a very old-fashioned look when I suggested she do some research, but I'd be willing to stick a few bob on the name Timothy not being all that high on the list of most common given names for Premier League footballers. After Breaker, I'm struggling. So the arrival of Timothy Castagna from Atalanta is something of a rarity. The Belgian fullback arrived for a fee of £21 million and marked his debut with the opening goal in the West Brom match. In the meantime, if you do have a long list of footballers called Timothy on your person, do us a favour and keep it to yourself, there's a good thing. The second permanent deal, which was confirmed only on Friday, saw 19-year-old Wesley Fofana arrive from St Etienne, whose clever mix of Indian dance stylings are a particular favourite of the cognoscenti here at the Avram Grant Olympic Rest Home for the Bewildered. Fofana was rumoured to have been the subject of interest from ourselves. Our first bid was apparently something in the region of whatever David Sullivan could find down the back of his zebra print sofa. Our second bid, even more. However, for some strange, bizarre reason, Les Verts preferred to accept a fee of between 30 to 36 million, depending on your source of information, from Leicester City. If that name sounds vaguely familiar, that may be due to the fact that there is a French rugby union international of the same name, which probably means I've been shouting handball at the wrong match, though given the current state of the handball law, who knows? The loan arrival came in the form of Turkish winger Cengiz Ünder. Ünder arrived on a deal which keeps him with the Foxes until the end of the season with an option to buy. He has yet to make his debut, the relevant paperwork being stuck in the post somewhere apparently. Ünder has spent the last few years at Roma. However, he drew criticism from Roma fans for making what has been reported as a military gesture as part of a goal celebration. This followed an offensive launched by Turkish armed forces into Syria. He then went on to post photos of said celebration all over Twitter, when the Turkish forces repeated their stroll over the border a couple of years later, all of which may or may not have been a contributory factor behind his move. Footballers and social media, eh? Rarely ends well. Just ask the Vardy family. On the pitch, the male half of that particular marriage has netted 5 goals in the opening 3 matches. 4 of those have been penalties, something that has become quite adept at winning. It's not the most sophisticated of tactics. Invariably, it involves Vardy exploiting the pace differential between him and the marking defenders to get on the end of a quick ball played over the top. The result is either a goal or a penalty caused by the chasing defender desperately trying to play catch-up, as Man City found to their cost the other day. There is a small, minuscule chance that Vardy might miss out this weekend. He does have an ongoing issue with his hip, which was giving him discomfort after the City match, but they reckon it's something that settles down after a few days, so he should be okay. Others on the sick list include the amusingly named Pratt, late fitness test on a knee, and Wilfred Yes Ndidi, who's got a long-term groin problem. Let's move on, shall we, to this week's look at the wild and wacky world of association football. I see that Messrs Foden and Greenwood will have a weekend off next week as a result of their Icelandic indiscretion, with Southgate admitting the players from the latest England squad. Foden will therefore be able to spend the weekend at home with his partner and kid, though the ambient temperature in the Foden household might be a wee bit colder than it was in Iceland. Meanwhile, Chelsea signing Thiago Silva managed to prove that it's really not a great idea to provoke the gods of football too much. Silva was quoted in the press as saying that he could have come to England many years before, but didn't fancy it due to what he perceived as the low quality of the game in this country. So it was nice to see him try and fit in with the locals up at the Hawthorns, where he strutted around, getting caught in possession as the Baggies raced into a 3-0 lead. Let's hope he opens his gob again before they play us, eh? And so on to us. Well, I expected a defeat in midweek, to be honest. Poor old David Moyes came in for all sorts of dog's abuse over the manner of the defeat, failing as he did to make a single substitution throughout the whole match. That abuse was a bit unfair, I thought. The inherent problems with the squad at the moment means that there's a significant gap between the form of what I shall refer to as the A and B teams. The bench was a strong one, and my guess is that had the game still been within our grasp with 15 minutes or so left, we might have seen one or two of those introduced. It wasn't to be, and with a need to keep the key members of the A team fit, there's a certain logic to not chasing the game that at 3-1 was almost certainly gone. In an ideal world, we would have sufficient depth in the squad for injury concerns to be not as great an issue. However, at the end of the day, Everton were deserved winners, something that seems to have bypassed a few complainants. Of course, we have finally taken steps to strengthen the squad, and we've signed a right-back in the form of Vladimir Kufal. The fee paid to Slavia Prague is a reported 5.4 million. For Slavia's sake, I hope they took a decent-sized deposit. The signing hopefully helps out with something of a problem area, with Fredericks becoming increasingly injury-prone, leaving only Johnson available for that particular berth. If the deal works out, it will represent a remarkable bargain, and we bid the lad welcome and wish him well. It remains to be seen whether or not the Impaler, as nobody's probably calling him, is selected this weekend. I'd guess it's a bit soon for him to start, though a spot of bench warming might not be out of the question. Fredericks will be an absentee, of course, his hamstring keeping away till after the international break. Diop and Cullen will be facing the last few days of their quarantine, as will the manager, who, it is to be hoped, has kept up to date with his BT Sport subscription, his stream having failed apparently during Wednesday's match. And so let's move on to the vexed question of the prediction. You might think that with them coming off the back of a 5-2 win up at the Etihad, my thoughts would be leaning towards a defeat, especially with us losing in midweek. Well, you'd be wrong. We have to treat the two competitions separately. The probable lineup will not be a million miles away from that which started last week against Wolves. If I'm correct, this would mean a return to the bench for Mark Noble, which might irritate some. The question one should ask is whether or not any change to last week's lineup would actually be an improvement. My view is that it wouldn't. Well, you laughed at me last week when I said we'd get at least a draw, so I suspect this week's prediction will also raise a titter or two. So the £2.50 I was going to have sent to assist the US President in his time of need to his Dettol for Donald fund will instead be sent to Mr. Winston's turf accountancy business as a wager on a 2-all draw. Enjoy the game.